with my teacher. I played a talk on YouTube and I heard him say, okay, everybody, you're all coughing. Let's just do it all together and get it over with. Come on. And I thought, oh my goodness, what a terrible joke. And I turned the talk off. And I didn't find him again for another year and a half, I think, because I just dismissed it straight away as rubbish humour. So that's what happens if you've got too much aversion. But anyway, just reminded me of that, hearing a few stifled coughs. So if you do want to, you can get it over with. Very good, thank you. You just covered for me. Excellent. So warm welcome back to everybody and to our Zoomies as well. Hope you feel fully included, even though I haven't seen your faces yet, but I will have a peek during the Q&A because I know a lot of you are following us for a long time. So yeah, I kind of rejigged my idea for this afternoon. I don't know what you're going to think about this. First, I thought I was going to give a whole talk on resentment. Would that have been good? I think it's often a favorite, you know, so a lot of you are nodding, some of you not so much. And then I decided to go through the process of metta instead, with including how to deal with difficult people, which is where resentment often comes up. That can be to ourselves as well. Crazy. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Apparently in Tibetan, they don't have a word for guilt. They don't understand the idea of self-hate. The Dalai Lama once said, but why would anyone do that? But anyway, I don't know. Sometimes maybe we are masochistic. Anyway, so I thought I'll kind of weave the two together, but there'll be a Q&A session later, so we can always go into anything that you wish in a little bit more depth. So just to recap a little bit on this morning, we talked about metta. Actually, I didn't really emphasize this, but we talked about metta in the whole path. But one of the ways I also like to kind of frame it to myself is that we can practice metta as an attitude and or as a cultivation. And it's a wisdom-based attitude. It's a kind of disposition we can have to everything. So in other words, adding that bit of kindness to the way that we're aware without formally cultivating metta necessarily. But then we can also do the more formal cultivation, which I call metta as a development or cultivation, metta bhavana. And that can take the metta practice into deep samadhi. So we're taking it deeper into, in a way, a main vehicle or a vehicle for liberation. And many people do this as their main practice. One of my teachers, Bhante Sujato, has been doing this ever since, I don't know, probably 30 years or so, just using the simple phrase, may I be happy. That's all he does. And sometimes people get angry about that on retreat and they say, I don't like the word may. And someone else said, I don't actually like the word I. And someone else said, well, I don't like the word happy. So he said, well, is be okay? I don't know if anybody's ever tried that. Just be. But anyway, it only really works when it encaptures a sentiment. So language is very helpful in this regard. And so it's a wonderful way to practice because it boosts our mental health, if you like. Like the cultivation of metta is like taking a supercharged vitamin for our health. But of course, in the process, we do come across obstacles, which is natural and part of our growth. It's part of our learning to face whatever obstacles we have erected towards loving kindness. Usually the resentments, the anger that we've kind of suppressed and let linger and fester and has now been pushed to the kind of subconscious sometimes levels of the mind or unconscious levels of the mind. Of course, things like boredom, irritation, anything on that spectrum of aversion basically tends to be an obstacle. And it's wonderful to see those obstacles in sharp relief. Metta is something that exposes them to us, and our job is to get curious, to get interested, and figure out what is it that's in the way of us fully enjoying the freedom of the practice, the freedom of genuine happiness that comes from a loving heart. So, and we can also try and find some perspective based again on right view. You know, if you are having a lot of self-critical thoughts or You know, you tend to be your own worst critic rather than your advocate. You can really ask yourself, you know, am I really any different from anybody else? Somebody else in my position, wouldn't they feel the same? And equally extending that to others. If I were in their shoes, how would I feel? How might my life have been different? Not for you, not putting yourself, thinking of how you, with your conditioning, would be in their shoes, but how is it for them? How might it be for them given their conditioning? And another really useful thing I find is to ask myself, do I really know what's going on for them? Do I actually know the whole story? Do I have all the information as to why a person is behaving a certain way in my perception, right? Because you're only one person and other people will perceive them differently. So do I have all the information? Making that pause. And this is kind of getting a bigger perspective on things. So I did want to talk a little bit about the process into the deep meditation and how to extend and expand that metta for all living beings, including those that we find very difficult and including those parts of ourselves that we don't really want to acknowledge or accept. And the first thing to say really is that although some energy and directed thinking and sort of, if you want to call it effort, is involved, it's actually a natural process. It's a natural process that takes off on the foundation of virtue. So once our attitudes are, you know, aligned with love and kindness, with good intentions, goodwill, and our virtue starts to grow, a natural sense of happiness starts to, in a way, accompany us through our life. And it's what the happiness that the Buddha called blameless bliss, anavajasukha. Even if you don't feel you have complete blameless bliss yet, it's a reduction of remorse and regret. You start to find some forgiveness. Your ethical conduct improves, so there's not as much to feel remorseful about, right? And so another kind of happiness starts to arise, which is the happiness of just knowing that you're living a virtuous life. You're trying to live in a way that creates the least harm possible for yourself and for other beings. Knowing that it's inevitable that we'll cause some harm in the course of our lives. Even a Buddha sometimes behaved in a way that was, of course, completely ethically aligned with the best of intentions, the purest intentions, and yet the impact may not have been as he wished. So even the Buddha had enemies. Isn't that a relief? What can we expect for ourselves? Someone somewhere won't like you, and they won't know you either. So what are they not liking anyway, right? Do you know yourself? I don't think they can if you don't. So, you know, it's impossible to avoid blame and also praise sometimes. So these two sort of diminish in importance once we realize it's all about perception, which is at the very least imperfect, right? Usually way off the mark. So the way that we practice then is based on virtue. So we have to get that aligned, and then the process becomes natural. There's a lovely sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, possibly chapter 10, and somewhere else as well, in the threes perhaps. And it talks about actually the path starting with suffering in some cases, and in other places the path starting with virtue. And whether you start from suffering or you start from virtue, both give rise to joy. Suffering gives rise to joy when we hear the Dhamma and we gain confidence in the teachings and we know there is a way out, there is a path that we can follow. And then the suffering starts to make sense in a way, and we have a way to respond to it that actually leads to the end of suffering rather than compounding the suffering we already have. And so whether you start, wherever you start from, you know, whether you're fortunate enough not to have that much suffering and you start from a place of virtue, the next link is joy. And that's just the joy in everyday life of living pretty well, having good friends, maybe some love in your life, hopefully, and, you know, maybe a livelihood that's meaningful for you, hearing the Dhamma, feeling that there is a path that provides even deeper meaning in your life, and all the way to the joy of meditation. So from there, when we sit to meditate, naturally there's a sense of ease. already there. We don't have to fabricate it. It comes from actually reflecting on our virtue and feeling kind of good about our lives. And this too can be cultivated. The Buddha actually encourages us to reflect on the goodness of our lives, whether that's the goodness that's bestowed to us or the goodness we try to do for other people, for ourselves, little acts of kindness, living a charitable life, thinking of others less fortunate than ourselves, etc. I'm sure you all have so many beautiful ways of being a decent, responsible, kind member of the society and of your community, serving on the Sheffield Insight retreats, because it's hard work to organise a retreat like this. These are things that we really should bring up in our mind and connect with the meaning and the kind of results of that, what that does for other people, how much you're contributing to peace and happiness in this world. And never underestimate that. Sometimes people ask me, what are you really doing for the world? You're a Buddhist nun, don't you want to go out to Palestine and be on the ground and show a presence there? And wow, if I had the resources to do that, wonderful, maybe it can help. But one of the beautiful messages that came to me was that somebody who'd been involved in our project and who learned a lot of metta meditation actually through our online talks said that now she was in the position where she was what was it? The Defend Our Juries organization. I think before that she'd been in the Extinction Rebellion groups, and I think she may still be. And now she's training thousands of other people in nonviolent protests. And she thanked me for that. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. We have this ripple effect. We don't know who comes into our lives and the lives that we touch. We just have no idea. But you can trust that if your intentions are good and you're living ethically as best you possibly can, then your life is for the benefit not only of yourself, but of others too. And we should bring this up until it gives us some joy. And then from there, when we do develop loving kindness, it takes us through into tranquility, into deep contentment, sukha, and deep meditation, samadhi. So this is a natural process. And the Buddha said that somebody who has virtue doesn't even need to will may joy arise, because it's natural. It's a natural part of the path. It's the law of nature, if you like. But one with joy, you don't need to wish may rapture and bliss arise. It's natural for one who has a sense of joy about their life, for bliss and happiness to arise. And likewise, the sequence continues all the way into deep, deep calm. And from there, as I said earlier, it's natural for one with samadhi that insight into the way things are will arise. So the process is natural, but at the same time can be encouraged through our practice and the way we use our minds. So there are two main ways, and I'm sure a myriad more ways of practicing loving kindness, but in the suttas there are two ways. And in the early Buddhist texts, the main emphasis is on a sense of course, the quality of loving kindness, but then spreading that loving kindness out spatially. So a kind of spatial expansion that spreads loving kindness to all four quarters. And many of you may be familiar with the little verse that goes something like, I will abide with a mind imbued with loving kindness. What is it? Spread in one direction, and then likewise to the second, to the third, to the fourth, above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. That's important. To all as to myself, or to myself as to all. And then it talks about loving kindness as being abundant, exalted, and immeasurable. The words actually, one of the words is mahagata, which literally means great. And appamana is immeasurable, which means without measure. So we don't measure people. We don't measure ourselves. We don't say, I can or I can't do metta. They deserve metta, they don't deserve metta. We don't measure. It becomes measureless, non-judgmental, to all as to oneself. And the simile that's given is as though you're standing on a mountain with a trumpet and you just blow that sound out and it goes everywhere equally. People all around the place hear it. And I was in Ladakh in 1996, which shows my age. or my gravitas. And yeah, it's 3,000 meters above sea level. And I think when you walk to the Lay Palace, it's about 3,002 or 3,004. And all you see are other valleys and mountain passes. And there's no impediment at all. And people do blow their conch shells and their trumpets on that in that little temple, the Lay Gompa, and you can hear the sound everywhere equally. So it's a similar simile to the sun shining impartially on all. And the second way, because this is a little bit not necessarily easy to do when we have hidden people, parts of ourselves that we haven't yet fully accepted. So the Visuddhimagga gives another approach, which is similar to what we've already begun today. And that is a gradual, sequential, incremental building up of metta through using different categories. And usually it talks about starting with oneself. Now, today I started with ourselves, oneself, myself, because I needed a little bit of settling time. And I have had quite an exhausting, well, I want to say a few days, then I want to say a few months, years, and more. So I thought perhaps it's the same for you. We all live in a very fast-paced world, and starting with ourselves might just help us to land. But generally speaking, that was put first because we're supposed to be the easiest person to generate loving kindness towards. And of course, that's not always the case, I think, in our societies. But the basic idea is we start with someone easy. And I really love the simile of building a fire. So we start with putting kindling on that fire, maybe even some firelighters if the kindling doesn't immediately take, because the kindling goes up quite easily, it takes the flame. And only after the fire is burning, then we add a few very small twigs. So this can be the second person. So if we start with ourselves, the second person would be the loved person. If we start with the loved person, the second person really ought to be ourselves. Okay. And you can kind of go between the two so that if you find it easier to send loving kindness to someone in your life, you can then imagine including yourself. May we be happy. Imagine yourself together until there's no distinction really there and the loving kindness is actually starting to ignite. So we put on the small twigs, and then when the fire's going a bit stronger, we can put on bigger ones, then we can put on logs. And who knows, maybe in the end we can even put wet logs on that fire because it's roaring by now. And that is the most difficult person. But we're not going to go there in these 2 days, okay? Unless you really, I don't know, have a very warm heart already, a very well-established fire. And it's an interesting simile because once I was in a monastery in Australia and we invited one of my teachers, Bhante Ujagara, to come there. And he agreed, to my amazement. He lives in Montreal, but he came all the way to near Sydney to do this retreat for about 7 or 8 nuns, which was brilliant because I was one of them. It might not have been a brilliant retreat if I wasn't one of them, but I was. I was really happy about that. And he had a little sort of fire in his, it's called a yurt, but it's made of wood. And it was very cold. So anyway, the fire stove was kind of cylindrical, quite long. And so it wasn't easy to build this fire. So I said to him, you know, it's just like loving kindness. You start with the kindling and then you put on the twigs and then this and then this. And then the next day he came out and he said, I put all those things on and it just went up in smoke. My whole room filled up with smoke. And I said, you mean you put the kindling and then this and then this? He said, yeah, I put them all on and then I lit it. So he didn't actually light the kindling first. He just lit the whole lot at once. And of course, it just completely, you know, smothered itself. It never really took off. And the whole yurt filled up with smoke. So this is not what we do. Okay. So we can be patient and just take one object, just take one person. I once took one person for an entire 2-week retreat and I had like a supercharged backup for my loved person. So my loved person was the person who invited me to the retreat and paid my airfare and paid whatever other fees were there. I was a nun, so I needed that. We don't use money. And I just felt so grateful. She wasn't by any means the closest friend. She was a friend of about a year who was an anagarika training in the monastery at that time. And I just saw her face with a big smile and kept thinking of the gift she'd offered. And it was such a beautiful object. I mean, she's a being, right? Not just an object. But as a catalyst for the loving kindness, it was so easy because it felt almost like I was sharing my retreat with her, and it gave the meditation more meaning. It wasn't just something I was doing for me. I wanted her to get benefit from her gift and from offering that opportunity to me. And I also had my teacher, which is the benefactor, often the first one that's recommended to begin with, if you're fortunate enough to have one. My first preceptor in Myanmar, where I ordained in 2004, and then for life in 2006. And so, but I would only bring him in occasionally because it was almost as though so much metta would arise. It was a bit too much. So I didn't want to kind of exploit that in a way. But I wanted it to build in a more sort of reliable way that could be extended to other people who were friends in my life. And so this is kind of like an easy way to get started with the metta practice, because we do tend to have preferences, right? Unless we're enlightened already, we probably will find it easier to send loving kindness to some people than others. And yet it really gets a lot more interesting when we start to move on to the next category, which is the neutral person, which nobody's neutral, okay? Everybody is somebody's nearest and dearest, but it's a person who we don't have particularly strong feelings of like or dislike towards. We might not know them very well. We might know them a little bit, maybe a neighbor, depending what your neighbors are like. I think many of the people here actually have neighbors they talk to, which is amazing, and are friends with and meditate with, which is even more amazing. But for most of us, there are people in our neighborhood that we see, but we don't really know, and we don't give a lot of thought to. And if you choose someone like this, when it comes to this stage in the loving kindness meditation, you might find that the warmth and the emotion of love that may be beginning or may be quite warm starts to fade. And you'll see that there's just not quite enough to keep your interest engaged. And again, it's not about judging, but it's interesting to notice that because we don't have so much investment in this person, we don't have hopes or plans or dreams, we don't really feel that much for them. We haven't really seen them in their full humanity, perhaps, or looked for what's lovable in them, because that's one of the things that generates love. To look for the beautiful, look for the lovable and agreeable in all beings. So that's an interesting reflection. We realize how self-centered, in a sense, our loving kindness has been. And yet when the feeling of loving kindness starts to arise towards a person who we don't know, and we can extend that to most of the world, right? The amount of people who are neutral, who we don't really know, are far greater than the amount of people who are liked or disliked, right? So many people that we don't really even imagine live in this planet. I don't know, there's countries I haven't even heard of sometimes, let alone imagining how it might be for people living there. Yeah. So once we do start to ride the wave of loving kindness and keep that strength of loving kindness going, even for the neutral person, it tends to become very, very reliable and also quite pure, in the sense that there's not much self-interest there. We might never meet these people, and yet we can still feel a genuine sense of benevolence and goodwill. And you may find that if you do meet one of these people who you've once met down the end of the road or in the shop, you start to feel like they're your friend, because you've been holding them in your heart and mind with loving kindness, with some concern for their life and their welfare, their happiness, their health. So this is very beautiful, and it shows what human beings are capable of. And the whole idea is, again, to bring it sort of equal as far as we can, so that the loving kindness starts to be truly unconditional. and inclusive. And like I say, doing this sort of stage by stage shows us where it isn't. It's a really good measure of the extent to which we've overcome not only a will, but also indifference, complacency, disregard, even contempt, right? Close to disregard. And then, we might be able to put a big log on the fire. So this is the difficult person, or a person with whom we have had difficulties before, not now, maybe before. So even this person is not fixed, right? There's a phrase that most people know from the Dhammapada: they robbed me, they abused me, they struck me. And then the Buddha says, hatred never ceases in one who harbors such thoughts. What else does it say? Something like, through hatred, hatred is never overcome. Through love alone is it overcome. And I think one of the reasons for that, I was reflecting on it, and I thought one of the reasons is it keeps us stuck in a perception of this person is like that. This person did this, and that's all they are, and I'm going to define them by it for the rest of their life. That's what we do with the penal systems, isn't it? You know, this person deserves to be put away forever because of something they've done, which might have been horrific and terrible and should never have happened. But still, that's not who they are. That's something they have done. And they're so much more than that. So harboring these kind of thoughts only increases resentment. And yet it's not advisable to begin with a person with whom we have great difficulties, someone who's maybe abused us or really hurt us, really done some harm to us. Maybe there's some trauma involved. It's better to be resourced first of all. And that's why this comes towards the end. And at the same time, when loving kindness meets the difficult, in a way, it gets its full power. It meets its aim. Remember, the aim of loving kindness is not just to feel good. It's not to feel lovey-dovey. I mean, it's nice if you do, it's wonderful. But it's actually to overcome ill will. And it's also worth saying that it's not in order to change another person. It's not, I will love you so that your behavior changes towards me. So as much as we may like another person's behavior to change, we practice it to free ourselves from ill will. And if they change as a result, wonderful. But if that's our intention, then it's not, again, unconditional. It's loving, expecting something in return. So we can work with the resentment, the anger that comes up at this time. Sometimes it might be necessary when you're practicing with a person you find difficult or annoying even. You know, it doesn't have to be someone really difficult. It could be someone you love that just irritates you a lot. I'm sure everyone has someone like that in their life. Probably all of the people who live in our monastery. I'm that person, probably. Because if you live with someone, then they get irritated. So, yeah. What was I saying? That's because it was about me. Yeah, so with the difficult person, what was I saying?
Practice to free ourselves from the will.
Yeah, you practice to free yourselves from your will. And if difficult emotions come up for you, you don't have to carry on. So at that time, if anger's arising, if some kind of grief or sadness is arising, irritation, etc., we can either take time to turn towards ourselves and to, again, adopt loving kindness as a way of relating to what's coming up. So to practice loving kindness to ourselves, or just to hold those emotions with compassion, with a sense of care. Or we can go back to an easier person. So we could go back to the loved person, the benefactor, teacher, person you respect, someone you feel safe with, and just drop the difficult for that time. Even when you are working with a difficult person, most of the time, unless it's kind of natural, I wouldn't stay with them for too long. One of the things that happened to me was a traumatic thing where someone physically assaulted me who was very, very close and had a lot of trauma from the past. And it was utterly heartbreaking and completely shook my world at the time. And I remember her saying to me, we just have to practice metta. And I thought, I just cannot do that. I don't want to think about this person who's caused me so much upset, more than upset, really. And I just trusted that. I just decided I'm going to carry on my practice as usual. I practice metta for myself and for anyone else, carry on with my vipassana, samatha, whatever. And then one day when I was practicing loving kindness in an intensive retreat, self-retreat at Gaia House, there was so much loving kindness flowing. I didn't make any effort, but she just came to mind. And it was as though she just dropped into this beautiful space of like golden energy that was peaceful and resourcing. And she just dropped in, and there was no impact at all. It didn't shake me, it didn't make my stomach kind of fill with dread. It was just so smooth because the heart was resourced. And there's this lovely simile in the suttas called the simile of the salt, where the Buddha talks about putting a salt crystal, a big, fairly big one, in a glass of water. And he said, if you put this salt crystal in a glass of water, can you drink that water? Of course not, right? It's just too salty. But what if you put the same size salt crystal in a beautiful mountain lake? Can you drink the water in the lake? Of course, you don't even notice. And perhaps the salt makes it even tastier and more nutritious. I don't know. It's totally different because the mind is big, expansive, gone to greatness. The mind is like that lake. But when the difficult memory or the difficult situation happens in our lives and our minds are small, our minds are brittle, they're hardened, they're tired, they're irritated, it has such a big impact, doesn't it? And because of this, it has a bigger karmic effect. So our job is to spread the loving kindness spatially, but also to expand that lake of the mind, to make it vast, to make it wide enough to contain what's difficult. And then you'll find the difficult actually doesn't feel difficult anymore. And the healing happens on its own. And after that experience, I could think about this person and talk about them in a way that wasn't so triggering. In fact, there was hardly any impact anymore. That was kind of impressive to me, but probably because I did wait for 2 or 3 years. I mean, I didn't even bring her in, actually. She just came in after 2 or 3 years. So this is the healing power of metta, and its innate kind of wisdom. There's a wisdom contained within it that will kind of guide you on where and how far you can go. And the aim, as I said, is to be able to have loving kindness for all beings equally and without measure. And I'll just share a little story to indicate this. There's a story, I don't know if this is in a sutta or a jataka, but it's usually about monks. So this is about 7 nuns who go into the forest and find a beautiful mountain. And they decide to climb that mountain. And in that mountain, there's a deep cave. And these nuns are hell-bent on liberation and decide that this would be a great place to get enlightened. So they go to this cave and determine to stay there and meditate, probably for the rest of their lives. But unfortunately, there were some bandits in the cave, and the bandits are very upset that they've been found and that these nuns are there to kind of take their place. And so the bandits get very upset and think that the nuns are going to dob them in. And so they say to these nuns, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to, do away with you because, you're going to bring the police. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. No, we give you our word. We just want to meditate. Just go away and leave us to meditate. Everything will be fine. And they say, no, we don't believe you, but okay, as a compromise, we'll just take one person as the sacrificial person, just to give you a warning. And so they ask the senior nun, so in this case, they ask someone like me, to choose which person they should take to sacrifice. So there's the senior nun themselves. There is her teacher. There is her best friend. There's her sister. There is a sick nun an old nun who can't really do that much anymore, and a useless nun who never could do very much. She just sits there and basically twiddles her thumbs. And so now the head nun has been asked which one to sacrifice. And what do you think she says? Nobody can answer if you've heard it before. What do you think? Who does she choose? The sick one, the useless one? Oh, I think one of them's the enemy as well. Does that make 8? One of them's the enemy, so that's a real candidate here. So what do you reckon? Someone has to say. Everyone said that. Oh dear. Very nice. You probably think that's a noble thing to say, but remember it's to all as to oneself. So the answer is a bit of an anticlimax. She couldn't choose. But the bandits were so impressed that she simply couldn't choose. Her love for the enemy was the same as for the teacher. Her love for the best friend was the same as for herself, same as for the useless nun, the sick nun. Is that true for me? Someone else just I've only got one, so it's okay. Yeah. And so she couldn't choose. And the bandits were so impressed that guess what they said? Okay, we let you go. We repent and ask forgiveness and we'll change our life forever. And Ajahn Brahm likes to add that then they all became monks. But I'm not sure that's really true or believable. But anyway, that is what we're aiming at. So it's a high goal, but it's possible. And even if we can start to soften a little bit towards ourselves, towards others, and bring more people into our circle of love, it's a huge accomplishment. How is it when you meet somebody that's truly loving, truly caring, that has your best interest at heart? They might not be kind of overly sentimental or always give you a hug or say the right thing, but you know that they have your best interest at heart without any doubt. You feel so safe. You know they never harm you. And in my experience from the people I know, because I do actually know 2 or 3 people like this who genuinely have like unconditional love. Their love for me is no different. They might give me time if I'm close to them and support and all the rest, but their love is no different for me than for anybody else. It's completely equal. And that's so inspiring. It engenders so much trust. So this is possible for all of us. And it's a beautiful process. It's a fun and happy path. So this is roughly how it happens. And when we do have that unconditional loving kindness for all beings, that's when we can enter deep meditation based on metta, based on loving kindness. It's as though all become one. There's a kind of unification there. All beings are the same as one being, no beings. It goes beyond beings. It's just love, without a giver, without a receiver. And that can be a beautiful abiding for the mind. So maybe before we begin, perhaps you could actually choose a loved person or a friendly person, someone who is friendly towards you and who you have feelings of kindness and friendship and well-wishing for. So someone who's easy to generate goodwill towards. Just think of someone at the beginning. And you can take your time. Sometimes it's not the most obvious. It's not the person you love the most, because that can be a little bit complicated and the mind can start going into stories and a lot of memories, which is okay to an extent. But I tend to choose someone who just brings a smile to my heart quite easily, who there's not any complication with. Could be someone you feel grateful to, nurturing towards, safe around. And once you have an idea of who to choose, then just drop that for a moment and let's begin by just spreading kindfulness through our body. I like to imagine sometimes that kindfulness, kind awareness is like the sun. The awareness is like the light of the sun, which illuminates whatever it falls upon. And kindness is like the warmth inherent in the sun's rays. And you might imagine that sunshine just gently falling on your scalp, top of your head, as though you're basking in that light and warmth. Contacting and receiving any feelings in the top of your head, across the scalp area. The light of awareness, making them clear the longer it shines in those places. And the warmth just softening and relaxing. Feelings at the top of the head. Befriending them. Caring for them. Letting them be. And the sun spreads through the face. Maybe you actually do have sunshine on your face right now. You can imagine it. As your awareness spreads to your forehead, eyes, nose, cheeks and jaw. Feeling whatever sensations you notice in your face area. Being kind to them, letting them be. The sunshine soaks through your shoulders, down your arms. Soaking through each and every part of your shoulder and arms. Right down to the hands, the fingers, the fingertips. Soothing any tension, inviting your shoulders, arms, your hands to relax. You may wish to adjust your shoulders at this stage if anything feels tight, contracted. Soaking in this kindful awareness through your chest. Allowing it to heal any pain, tension, tightness in the chest area. Perhaps noticing subtle sensations as the kindfulness grows in strength. Just caring for them and moving on through your belly, around your rib cage. From the upper back all the way down to your lower back. Soaking your entire torso with kindfulness, as though basking in the light and warmth of the sun. Noticing your hips, your buttocks, and any feelings happening there. Welcoming them, letting them be. Before moving down through your thighs. So your thighs are soaking in the sunshine of kind awareness. Every part of your thigh, the back of the knee joints. And down your legs into the ankles. Heels. The soles, the bridges of your feet, and each and every toe. Taking your time to feel into every toe. Giving them permission to relax. Just feeling the whole body soaked through with kindfulness. Notice if there are any parts of the body you're still contracting or holding tighter than is needed, sometimes out of habit. And just invite them to expand, to take their space. Now just tuning in to any feelings that are pleasant or neutral. Maybe a general sense of ease, maybe tingling sensations, perhaps a feeling of warmth around the chest or anywhere else. And once again, connecting with your heartfelt wishes of goodwill towards yourself. And as though you're offering yourself a beautiful gift, maybe a bouquet or a flower, single-stemmed rose. Just repeat the phrases of loving kindness that you used earlier, or maybe different ones. Whatever worked or works. Saying the words clearly, calmly, rhythmically. May I be happy. And then listening in the gap between each phrase to allow the mind to resonate, the heart to open towards the meaning of these phrases. Or planting the next seed in the heart, offering the next flower. Staying embodied, staying connected to the meaning of these phrases. Just trusting in the process, trusting the results to come in their own time, making good mental karma, directing the mind in wholesome ways. The fruits have to be good. If you wish, you can continue in this way. It feels healing and nourishing to you. Otherwise, I'd like to invite you to now bring to mind the loved person, friend, a benefactor, whoever you chose at the beginning. And invite them into your mental world as though they were right beside you or in front of you, wherever you'd like them to be. Imagine greeting them, maybe with a smile or a hug, folded hands. Perhaps looking into their eyes or giving them a smile. And get a sense of this person's presence. How does it feel to be around them? What are their particular qualities that engender a natural feeling of love, ease? Maybe you can see them in your mind's eye, see their face. Once you have a clear sense this person is very dear to you in your life, staying connected to your own embodied experience, perhaps the area around the chest that's comfortable for you. See what phrases emerge. And start offering loving kindness to this being. Perhaps there are certain wishes you have for them or they have for themselves. Maybe the same as yours or different. Keeping this person in mind, start offering loving kindness in the same way, pausing between each phrase to allow the feelings of loving kindness to emerge. For planting the next phrase. Keep it consistent. Your mind's wandering or chattering a lot. You might wish to use the phrases more frequently, maybe continuously, one after the other. Your mind is settling, becoming quiet, and the feeling is growing. You may want to give longer pauses between each phrase. See what works for you. Now, gently bidding farewell to this loved person. You've been working with them. And staying connected, reconnecting with yourself, your body. Noticing any effects of the practice, any feelings associated with loving kindness. Stillness. Any pleasant feelings. Feelings of ease. Just allow them to spread gently through your body. Soaking you through from head to toe. Perhaps wishing yourself well again. As you feel this being, this body sitting. Allow yourself to relax, to trust your own goodwill towards yourself. Won't ring the bell because some of you may wish to continue. So if you're feeling like carrying on, please do. And otherwise, you can gently open your eyes and continue in the walking posture.